Privatisation has failed. It's been failing for 40 years, and Thames Water is pretty much the poster child of failed privatisation. I want to talk today about what's happening with Thames Water and what the solution is, because I think it's really important that we all understand what is going on here. Who is making money, at whose expense, what is actually happening. Until we understand it, we are going to get bamboozled. So that's what I'm trying to do today, explain what is going on. So Thames Water was privatised in 1989. Since it was privatised, it has racked up a debt mountain of £19 billion. It started out at zero debt. And the reason it's racked up that debt is so that it could hand out massive dividends to its shareholders around the world. Who is Thames Water owned by? Let's have a look. So Thames Water is mostly owned by shareholders elsewhere in the world, a little bit by UK pension funds for academics, but mostly owned by shareholders around the world. And when Thames Water racked up most of this debt, it was primarily owned by Macquarie, which is an Australian asset management firm. Macquarie really went hell for leather in racking up this debt and extracting as much as possible for shareholders. And that's why Thames Water has the highest debt, although all of the privatised water companies in England have big debts and unsustainable debts. And Southern Water, with its £6 billion debt mountain, is next in line to possibly collapse under the weight of its debt due to rising interest rates. Thames Water was asking for our bills to go up by 59%. 59% over the next 5 years. Ofwat, the water regulator, said no, but they are allowing Thames Water to increase our bills by 35%. So let's take a look at some of the letters that Thames Water so-called customers are getting in the post about their bill increases. So Thames Water has got the go-ahead to put up our bills, but not as much as it wanted to. And so there are a couple of further stages for Thames Water to try to save itself in its current privatised form. Now, the stage that we're in right now is where Thames Water is trying to borrow more money. So they've already got a £19 billion debt mountain. They want to borrow a further £3 billion. So in the Royal Courts of Justice right now, there are over 100 lawyers and advisors spending their time trying to sort out this mess. Now, the bailout proposal that's being put on the table means that every household in the Thames Water region will be paying around £250 of their bills just to service this extra debt. So because Thames Water is an essential service, you can't just let it go bust. If you let it go bust, that would mean the workers would stop working, the water would stop coming out of our taps, sewage would be backing up back into our toilets. It's not a tenable situation. And that's the reason that the government has this legislation for special administration, because it recognises that Thames Water isn't just any other company. It's not Wilko's on the high street, which can go bust, and that's, just what happens in a market. Thames Water serves nearly a quarter of the people in the UK with their water, and so it can't just go bust. And that's why this legislation exists. In the case of special administration, we would be able to cut the debt by around half. So the Treasury says that the debt in that case would be cut by around 40%. So that would be around £7.5 billion wiped off the debt. JP Morgan suggested it would be more like 55%. So that would be more like £10.5 billion wiped off the debt. In any case, it's around half. So you instantly cut that debt pile in about half, and then you could refinance the debt in the public sector. And so it's far, far cheaper for the debt to be cut under special administration and then refinanced as public sector debt, rather than simply loading this privatised company with ever more debt that we pay for through our bills. And in any case, it's not going to work, because this company is going to collapse. What these creditors are really trying to do is make as much money as they can while they still can, make hay while the sun shines. And also they know that if there is special administration, the public interest comes first. Whereas if they can keep this merry-go-round, money-go-round going for a little longer, they get to come first. The creditors get to be the priority. And that's where all these fees and interest payments come from. That's all going to them. So they're trying to maximise their return at the public's expense. So what we need to do is we need to push the government to bring Thames Water into permanent public ownership. So special administration, take away its licence, cut the debt by around half, and then take it into permanent public ownership. And then we can stop paying. We can stop paying for their debt. We can stop paying for their dividends. We can make sure that every penny of our bills goes back into the infrastructure to fix leaks, to stop sewage, rather than leaking out to shareholders around the world. So Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, who has the power to take Thames Water into special administration, and Ofwat, the water regulator, have not even been in court. They have not attended the court process. And the judge actually commented on this because the judge pointed out that this is a matter of public interest, and the Environment Secretary was nowhere to be seen. So if we look at what happened under Blair, the government actually stepped in to protect households, consumers, the public interest, because back in 2001, Railtrack went bust. It had £8 billion worth of debt, and it had been responsible for several fatal accidents on the railway. And the government stepped in to defend the public interest in the case of Railtrack, and the shareholders ended up getting around a quarter of what they wanted when that company went bust. So what we need is a government that actually stands up for the public interest instead of just rubber stamping a process where the people who've got us into this mess borrow even more at our expense. If Thames Water was brought into public ownership, what would that mean? What we could do is we could copy what happens in countries around the world. So 90% of the world runs water in public ownership. And we could look at what happens in places like Paris. We at We Own It have put forward a model of what Thames Water could look like in public ownership. And it would have involved households, the people who use the water company, workers, trade unions, anti-sewage groups, community and environmental groups. It would have those on the board, as well as local politicians who are accountable to local councils, local people. So instead of having a company that is accountable to a handful of shareholders around the world, you would have a company that is working for the benefit of households and the environment, and you would build that into the governing structure. It's really unacceptable what's going on with Thames Water right now, and that is why we at We Own It are campaigning to stop the bailout and to bring this company into permanent public ownership where it belongs. We have been campaigning outside the High Court with anti-sewage campaigners like Windrush against sewage pollution. Windrush against sewage pollution have been inside the court, taking the case forward on behalf of Thames Water's 16 million so-called customers who have no choice. They have been defending our interests in court together with Charlie Maynard, who is the Liberal Democrat MP for Witney. And we at We Own It have been outside shouting in support, showing that the public want to have Thames Water in public ownership, not to have this bailout. If you want to get involved, if you think that this rip-off should be stopped, please sign up to our newsletter. I will put the link in the box below. And we need you in this fight. Why should we pay for their debt? Why should we pay for their dividends? We want every penny of our water bills to go into fixing the infrastructure, looking after this precious resource that belongs to all of us.